Now before we get started, yes, okay, desperately need might be a bit of a stretch with some of these wrestlers, but when you can see the potential of a performer and you really want them to succeed, maybe there's nothing wrong with a bit of hyperbole. We should point out though that in the majority of cases on this list, the blame doesn't lie with the performers themselves, but it does very much lie with the creative behind them. And in some cases, admittedly, we just really miss what we had. I'm Adam Nicholas, this is What Culture Wrestling, and these are 10 WWE wrestlers who desperately need new gimmicks. Number 10, John Morrison. Now, I'm no expert on John Morrison, but I'm pretty confident that he didn't leave WWE and travel the whole entire world making himself a star just to return and be Miz's sidekick. I mean, maybe he did, maybe he didn't. That's his own decision, of course, but a performer of such ludicrous talents deserves more than playing second fiddle to the Miz. Now, I'm not saying that this duo isn't great, because they definitely are. I mean, look what they got out of Bad Bunny at WrestleMania 37. But wouldn't it be fascinating if the WWE Universe got a chance to get to know someone like Johnny Mundo, the uber-arrogant heel that Morrison played when in Lucha Underground? And there are many other iterations of Johnny from his time away from the company that we could draw on, but either way, Morrison probably needs a different character to just being Miz's mate. We've seen what he can do when he returns as a tag team star, spoiler, it was great, but let's find out if he can still do it as a single star. Number 9, Mandy Rose. There are many stars throughout the company's history, be they male or female, where Vince McMahon has chosen them because he strives for what he considers to be the perfect aesthetic for HD television. And as shallow as that brief might be, if that is indeed the brief, then Mandy Rose is just about as perfect for Vince McMahon as it gets, and yet she still finds herself treading water, doing a whole lot of nothing. Rose is immensely talented and one of the most improved performers of the last few years, and that flying knee, god damn it man, she puts Triple H to shame. And if you rewind to the period following WrestleMania 36, it seemed as though God's greatest creation was primed to become a major star on WWE TV. I mean, just remember how good that feud was with Sonya Deville, not to mention the fact that Fire and Desire were absolutely class as well. She even managed to make work the little romance between herself and Otis. That was genuinely compelling television. And now she finds herself back in a tag team with Dana Brooke. She doesn't even need that dramatic of a repackage, for God's sake. Just give her something that isn't just generic blonde female wrestler number 5 that Vince McMahon thinks looks good on television. Number 8, Nikki Cross. Nikki Cross doesn't just need a new gimmick, she needs a gimmick full stop. The diminishing of the former WWE Women's Tag Team Champion is extremely bizarre to say the least. There was once a time when she was one of the few females who seemed to actually have a character, albeit a character that didn't have much outside of being feral, and whether you liked it or loathed it, there was still an element of intrigue. However, slowly but surely, every ounce of her character has been stripped away. She hasn't done anything on TV except for worry about Alexa Bliss last year, which in itself seems weird because how could she try and tell somebody about being sane when she literally was a feral woman? I don't know, I'm trying to apply logic here. That's my fault. At the time of recording though, we're now 2 months removed from Nikki Cross's last match on WWE TV, and the future doesn't seem to bode particularly well for the Scot at the moment. And it's a massive shame too, because she's proved she's got some serious chops over the years. I mean, just think back to that amazing match she had with Asuka in NXT. That is what Nikki Cross is capable of. All she needs is a bit of a repackage. Even if that means going back to just being feral and crazy, it's better than whatever the hell she's doing right now. Number 7, Dexter Loomis. Oh boy, they do not come much more gimmicky than Dexter Loomis. The creepy dude with a mustache character has somehow achieved more success in NXT than it ever did in TNA. The problem, of course, is the gimmick is just so one-dimensional that it just seems to lack any real long-term prospects. They've tried to add a few more dimensions, which seem to be a romantic dalliance with Indy Hartwell and, look, he can draw. But each of these additions has done little to add anything really to the character. I mean, creepy babyface should never ever be a thing. Surely he could do with a change. I mean, I don't know what that change is. Maybe you just cart him off to a mental asylum and they can rebrand him and repackage him there as a way to disappear him off TV. I don't have the answers, but whatever they are, it's not this. Number 6, Liv Morgan. And yes, admittedly, we've been here before, haven't we? Liv Morgan needs a gimmick change, but I guess if that gimmick change leads to her interrupting a Lashley and Lana wedding, then maybe she's better off staying where she is with the Riot Squad for the time being. And it's a bit of a strange one, this really, because Liv Morgan has plenty of qualities, and although this might seem like a lazy comparison, it's hard to ignore the fact that her character seems to be very close to what WWE have transformed Alexa Bliss into. I mean, it felt like a bigger move for Bliss to jump into that role, and look at Liv Morgan, she's kind of been been doing a similar thing for quite some time now. If there's one thing that Liv Morgan does have working in her favour, however, it's the fact that fans have actually connected to her. There is a portion of the audience that really love Liv Morgan. She's put on some quietly great matches with a variety of different opponents, and there's no reason to believe that Liv doesn't have major mainstream potential too as a babyface superstar with crossover appeal. It should also be said there's nothing really wrong with the Riot Squad as a stable. I mean, there wasn't anything wrong when Sarah Logan was still there, but still, it's time for Liv Morgan to get a repackage once again, one that actually works, and to actually let her get a shot at running in the women's singles division. Number 5, Braun Strowman. There was a time when this man stood on your TV screen with a musical instrument, and it was the greatest thing you've ever seen. Just a couple of short years ago, the monster among men was seemingly overachieving on the main roster, but a number of confusing face and heel turns akin to the Big Show have rendered him somewhat toothless. Now, in terms of a look, Braun Strowman has made a couple of minor changes in recent times. He's shaved his head and he's changed his gear up to look like a gardener, but it all leads back to the same old Braun, and the excitement just seems like it's kind of gone. Feuding with Bray Wyatt and Alexa Bliss all of last summer certainly didn't help, but it isn't as if the fault only lies at their feet. Strowman finds himself at a crossroads, albeit a crossroads that still technically sees him hanging around the main event, but it's hard to truly believe that WWE are going to pull the trigger on him at this point. And it's just so insanely hard to look back at Braun smashing everything back in the day, and that was so over, and yet we just don't have it anymore. Bring that back. It was great. We want it, and actually have some conviction with the man this time. Number 4, TBar. Now here's an interesting one, because now that he's been unmasked, the chances of TBar getting a repackage have drastically gone up. That said, of course, there's every chance that the former Dominik Dijakovic spends the next few weeks rambling about being freed from the chains of anonymity, doubling down on the disaster that was Retribution. Or maybe, just maybe, this immensely talented and athletic big guy can finally get a platform from which he can shine. I mean, the simple thing here would be to give him his name back and tell us why he was seduced by Mustafa Ali and Retribution in the first place, and maybe give us a reason why we should actually root for this guy. I mean, who doesn't love a good redemption story? Let's put some flesh on the big bones of Dominik Dijakovic. The Retribution misery can be salvaged if it leads to him becoming a beloved babyface hero that he probably can be. Number 3, Ricochet. There are times when you watch footage of Ricochet on NXT, or even during some of his early days on the main roster, and you just wonder, how on earth did we get here? 3 years into his WWE tenure, and the highlight of the former US Champion's WWE career seems to be, well, the US Championship. Also, he got beat up by Brock Lesnar in Saudi Arabia once, and on top of that, Retribution kicked the crap out of him for weeks. Ricochet's athleticism and body control are off the chart. I mean, he's the best in a company full of elite athletes, and the problem is that whole thing just sort of ends there. When WWE try to force him to do promos, we know that's not his strength. We need him to have a gimmick that plays to his strengths, similar to what happened in NXT. Yes, flying around is just what he does, so let's make that interesting. The man may be superhuman in what he does, but it doesn't mean he has to be a superhero. So why not, completely contradictory to him not being a superhero, put a mask on the man? Remember Prince Puma in Lucha Underground? He was awesome. I mean, imagine it, a tiny little bit of mystery, no pun intended, and maybe even a manager or a mouthpiece, and boom, we have a brand new character who's this incredible Lucha Libre star. Number 2, Tamo Ciampa. To say that Tamo Ciampa has overachieved in WWE would be extremely accurate, and I don't want you to take that as a negative. It's very much a positive. Ciampa has scratched and clawed his way up the ladder from once getting the piss slapped out of him by Samoa Joe on NXT back in the day, at a time when he was uncontracted, I should point out, to arguably being one of the best NXT champions in the title's near decade-long history, which is why it's quite difficult to find him in the position we do now, in 2021, in this weird sort of limbo. In the last year, we've sort of seen Ciampa's transition from the top guy to the guy who helps the top guy, as he's put over the likes of Karrion Kross and Walter in incredible matches, but obviously that makes the pecking order extremely clear. Putting a bunch of other heels ahead of him means that Ciampa is no longer the top heel, and that means he doesn't get to operate in a space where arguably he does his best work. But as was proven by the man in his match against Walter after shaving his head and putting on his old gear again, the change doesn't have to be anything huge. But even the tiniest whiff of a new look made him feel fresh and exciting again. Honestly, while it wouldn't have been feasible for he and his family, seeing Ciampa beat Walter and go off to NXT UK to do a bunch of matches over there would have felt like something that could have worked. At this point, the only belt on NXT he could still run for would be that North American Championship. You get the feeling they might be holding on to that one for the future, and I'm not suggesting he goes all the way back to a gimmick like, I don't know, Muhammad Hassan's lawyer back in the day, but you get the feeling that a little change might just do him the world of good. And number 1, with a bullet, Sami Zayn. For starters, conspiracy theorist Sami Zayn is a great character. The immensely irritating nature of the gimmick just shows you how good it is, and Zayn remains one of the most entertaining performers on WWE TV, and his descent into neurosis and madness has been really fun to watch. But having said all of that, Sami Zayn needs a change. Alright, okay, look, he doesn't need a change. I would like him to have a change. We would like to see a change in Sami Zayn, because just remember how amazing babyface Sami Zayn was in NXT. To say that Sami Zayn could mimic the path of Daniel Bryan is not an overstatement by any stretch of the imagination. Bryan came off that amazing heel run, and look at him now, babyface once again, and the fans love him. Sami Zayn has got that exact same potential, and WWE proved it in NXT with that amazing run towards the NXT Championship. The comparisons of Zayn being the underdog from the underground, much like the mega underdog Daniel Bryan, are there for all to see, and the fact that Sami Zayn hasn't even been pushed into the upper echelons of maybe a main event star at some point is just genuinely a missed opportunity. I understand he's not Vince's typical looking kind of guy, but just look at the kind of success they had with Daniel Bryan, and Sami Zayn can give you exactly that. Sami Zayn's run as a psychotic heel has been nothing short of exceptional, but you can't tell me that if you could trade that in for an incredible babyface run and him holding the WWE Championship up at the end of WrestleMania, you wouldn't do it in a heartbeat.